Greetings, duelists, and welcome to another video. So this is gonna be week number 9 of deck report. Uh, there was a very important event that happened this weekend, and I kind of want to talk about it because even though my deck choice did not change much, a lot of things happened and a lot of duels ended up happening that just changed my perspective on like how this format might shape up in the future. uh, if you are interested in listening to like specific interactions and gameplay and things that I've done against like the top tier strategies, like for example the Snake Eye Fire King deck, then I encourage you to just stay here and like listen. Uh, if you're here for just because of the deck profile, I'll probably put a timestamp because there is something I want to talk about when it comes to the construction as well. But yeah, without further ado, let's begin. So this past weekend was a double case tournament for in Titan Games. It was a 67 player event, so almost 70 players, and it was 7 rounds of Swiss. Uh, I ended on an X3 record, and I faced a bunch of different decks. 4 out of the 7 decks that I faced were fire decks, and I only lost to one of them. And I kind of want to talk about the interaction that happened on that game because that was a game that if a little bit more time was given, or if I had a very other specific hand, or I maybe would have sequenced something a little bit different, I could have won that game, and that would have made me undefeated against like the fire decks at least in that event. I did face one voiceless voice, which I did ended up winning against. It was a very rough match because they played through 2 hand traps and ended up on their entire board. And whenever voiceless does something like that, it's really hard for you to win. Like unless the rest of your hand are cards that can just interact with their board, because Voiceless Voice is very strong against simplified game states. In simplified game state, that deck is pretty much always gonna win because it's really hard to get rid of the resources. But there is one card in my extra deck that really just solidified that match, and yeah. So uh, I my 2 other losses were to Adventure Synchron and Dinomorphia, which are 2 lesser known decks, are 2 more roguish strategies. Uh, Another note I want to make that is really important because those are 2 matchups that were very die roll dependent. I lost every single die roll uh, except the one with my Fire King opponent, which was the one who actually ended up defeating me. So essentially, I pretty much had a rough patch against every single deck in the room, and the only die roll that I won is the match that I ironically lost to. But yeah, I'm gonna talk about the specific Fire King deck. Um, it was against Angel Rolon from Money Glitch, so shoutouts to Money Glitch. Yeah, shoutouts to Angel. Really good player. I'm not gonna fault like any of his plays because I think he did the most optimal play possible. Some people might say it's going to be very convenient the way he won because uh, basically what ended up happening was there was like around 9 minutes on the clock, and we got to a point where we drolled each other like throughout multiple turns. So the game set became super simplified, and we were pretty much trading resources. But it got to a point where he wanted to make a board that I had issues to break, and I will tell you later on that I did actually have the tools to break that board. But then I'll tell you the issue that led to my loss in that match. So uh, essentially, in the 9 minutes that we had, he took around 7 to 8 minutes to try to make the board that he wanted to make because it became the game state became a little bit too simplified, and it got to a point where he just knew that he couldn't get rid of my entire board, but he wanted to make sure that his board was strong enough for me to not break his. And the very specific scenario he ended up was there was an SP Little Knight that was banished because he did trigger the SP Little Knight to banish one of my Centur-ION monsters. Otherwise, he probably would have lost to a specific extra deck card, which I will talk about. And the way he ended on his board was he had Linkuriboh in graveyard, Zealantis on the board, and two Snake-Eye Ash. Both Snake-Eye copies of Snake-Eye Ash got summoned by Flamberge. And then during the end phase, the SP Little Knight comes back and is co-linked to the Zealantis. I look at this board, and on my side of the board, I have two Centurions, both in defense. I had Lubellion in graveyard. I had another Bestial on board, I think, or in hand. And one other card that I had was Ghost Ogre Snow Rabbit. And if you think very, very hard on this, this is a board that I can actually play around with the current resources that I had on board in my hand. However, the issue at hand is I only have 40 seconds left in order for me to break that board, in order for me to win the duel. And one other card that he had that I don't own, but that card was very, very important and very imperative to his victory, was Promethean Fire Princess. If the Promethean Fire Princess was not in his graveyard, I essentially had a way to win the duel. And you'll see it later when you see the extra deck. But essentially, I pretty much just lost that match because 40 seconds is not enough time for me to actually break that board and actually try to swing in for life. I was down by 1,400 life points when this scenario happened. So that was my only Fire King Snake-Eye loss. I beat the rest of them, and I even won against a pure variant. I won against Voiceless Voice. I won against... Yeah, pretty much almost all my victories were against the meta decks. Again, like I mentioned, my one loss... Well, one of my losses was to Adventure Synchron, and it's kind of unfortunate because I lost the die roll, and when it comes to decks like that one, it really the number of hand traps that you have in your hand and the way you interact with them is really, really important, because that is pretty much a YOLO deck. It's pretty much one of those combo decks where they just win if they manage to resolve their win condition. Their win conditions is Junk Speeder, and every single game on that match, because it did go to game 3, he opened Rite of Aramasir, and he opened Synchro Overtake, which are two incredibly strong extenders that can play through hand traps. And it pretty much became every single duel, I had to open the right cards to interact with his setup, or interact with the way he would try to contest my board. And that's pretty well unfortunate. It just pretty much came down to luck. My other loss was to Dinomorphia, and again I lost the die roll. He just set 5, and out of those 5 cards he set, he had 2 of the fusion spells, one of the counter traps, and he had Ferret Flames. And Ferret Flames was pretty much the blowout, because that card pretty much just wipes out my entire board if I try to contest against them. I do have a favorable Dynamorphia matchup because I do play Bestials, and Bestial Druid's Worm specifically is really strong against like Dynamorphia because it is a graveyard effect, meaning that it plays on a Rex turn and it sends the rest turn to a graveyard, which means it does not trigger its graveyard effect. However, my only way to get to Druid's Worm got contested by the Dynamorphia counter trap by the Intact, and uh, shoutouts to Aram. Like he actually did play it well because he knew that this was my win condition against him. Um, but essentially, it just got to a point where a war of attrition happened. And game three, I lost because I got rid of his entire board, but I ended on only Typhon in my board. And that gave him the victory because after he saw me summoning Typhon, he remembered that he had Typhon in his extra deck, so he Typhoned away my Typhon and he just swung for game. Which, again, just kind of unfortunate. Shoutouts to everyone, though. Good player. Um, but yeah, those were my like duels that I've had. I could talk about the other Snake Eye Fire King decks and how I interacted with them and what led me to victory. Because again, I lost all of my die rolls, pretty much. So like hand trapping them and sequencing your plays when you're going second is very, very, very important in this format. If you are a veteran player and you played past formats in the past where you've seen like very strong inward kind of decks, then you should already be familiarized with how you want to like interact with your opponent, because the Snake Eye Fire King deck is really, really powerful. It's like the deck with the highest ceiling in the game. It can play through more than one hand trap sometimes, but the deck does have its choke points, and there are some counters to the strategy as long as you know what you're doing. Um, but yeah, that's it for explanations. Now I'm gonna go to the deck profile and talk about all the changes that I did, because I did make a lot of notable changes. So, 3 Primera, 3 Trodea, 1 Emeth. I'm going to leave these cards for last. I'm going to make a video on these cards as well. Triple Rebellion, Magnamut, Baldrake, double Durasworm, triple Crow, triple Veiler, the one Ghost Ogre that I talked about earlier, Nibiru. That's it for monsters, except for this one. I'll talk about this one last. Triple Stand Up, triple Oath, one Bonds, 3 Talents. This card goes in hand with the monsters. 1 Branded Regained, 1 to the Branded, 1 Phalanx, and 3 Imperms. Now that we are at this point, this is a little bit of the same as last list. Essentially, one thing that I did was I cut terraforming again because the main deck is 42 cards at the moment, and I didn't want to like up the deck count by a lot because I wanted the most amount of playable hands possible. And one of my losses, which was the Adventure Synchron player, in game one, I stopped his cards from resolving, but I did not see any Centurion card. And not only did I not see any Centurion card, I also did not see any Bestial cards either, which was very, very integral to the matchup. So not having enough starters made me lose that game, which prompts me to not try to go above 40 too much. which is ironic saying that because terraforming is a consistency card. However, it is a consistency card that loses to Droll, and Droll is a common hand trap this format. Um, Nibiru did not perform at all. I might actually take out Nibiru in the future. Ghost Ogre overperformed. I might actually play more Ghost Ogres. So this is something that I don't regret. We have the Villain and the Crows. These cards did well. Uh, Joshua Smith did a video talking about like the format when he was discussing Pack's YCS deck, and he brought up how Crow should be used as a board breaking card and not as a card to insulate the end boards that your opponent is trying to make. And that knowledge, I I had that knowledge before watching like the VOD or watching like that part of the stream that he did. However, it's really good that we both arrived at the same mindset because that interaction actually won me 2 games against the Snake-Eye Fire King deck. Uh, I lowered Druid's Worm to 2 because I'm playing Baldrake. At first I did not like Baldrake in testing. I thought Baldrake was like ballsack. Um, However, I did try it out this event this weekend, and this card came up a lot. It came up significantly as an interruption, and I'm happy it's in my main deck. Like, in moving forward, I'll keep Baldrake in my list if I am playing Bestials, and Magnamut is just Magnamut. Um, so now that I talked about a few of the changes that I did, I'm gonna talk about another really big change that I did. Uh, I am playing technically a 2 card engine, and this 2 card engine is phenomenal. I think this won me actually enough games like this past weekend, and I'm actually perplexed of how great this engine worked. And the engine that I'm talking about is the Crimson Gaia package. So 3 Vision Resonators and Crimson Gaia. Uh, I'm going to show you the extra deck soon, and the extra deck just like has extra synergy with the way I constructed these cards. But I want to talk about this first. So what this engine does is it fixes 2 problems that Centur-ION have. Problem number 1 is find a good send fodder for the a stand up spell, because essentially one issue that Centurion always have is whenever you're trying to resolve stand up, almost every card in your hand is valuable. Like stand up is a really strong card if it resolves, and you do get the plus out of what you're minusing with this card. However, there are some cards in your hand that you just want to keep in your hand, and essentially it just turns this card like into a lesser powerful card if you're not like resolving its effect, or you're trading out like one good card in your engine for like just resolving your Centurion effects. With the Vision Resonator, not only are you getting like a free value out of the stand up, but you're getting a recursive engine that just helps you play around like interactions your opponent makes. And this also fixes a second issue the deck has. And the second issue that it fixes is the lack of tuners in the deck. The only tuner that we have in our name is Primera, unless you count FF Veiler, but I really don't want to count hand traps as like tuners for this. So with Primera being our only real tuner in the deck, this engine gives us another resource for a tuner, and you can keep doing it every single turn. Uh, it's also really good because the way this monster is summoned is if you control a dark monster that is more than level 5. And there are 2 ways to do that. One of them is with the Bestials, and the other one is with Centurion Trudea. Because Centurion Trudea can make itself level 8 when you special summon it. Post Legacy of Destruction, this engine is going to be even better because what you're going to have is another Centur-ION monster that is higher than level 5 and it's a dark monster. And not only that, but it's a high level Centur-ION monster that can recur itself from the graveyard. So you're getting extra value out of this engine alone by playing those cards. So that's like really really strong on that end. But yeah, there is also a combo that you can do with this and your bestial monsters that in the future just bridges into your Centur-ION cards. Once you see the extra deck, you'll see what cards I paired to make Resonator package a little more viable, because this is not level 4. This is level 2. So the synchros that you make with this are not the synchros you primarily make with Primera. However, there are some synchros that you just make in your extra deck that just extra synergize with this. That also synergizes with the Centur-ION cards. But yeah, I do not regret this engine at all. This engine overperformed for me. There was one game where I only had one Centur-ION play and it got hand trapped, and I essentially just played making a really strong end board without any Centur-ION cards at all, and it was because of this. It was because of this plus Lubellion, which is a really good strong setup. If you want to see combos with this in the future, I will make them. This card is going to make it. This card is going to be having its own video. This card is really, really phenomenal, and not just in the Centur-ION deck. I think this card is going to be a really good engine moving forward for a lot of strategies, and I kind of want to talk about that a little bit more in depth later on. So that's it for the main deck. It's 42 cards. I really wanted to play 41. I think in the future I'm just gonna cut Nibiru and it will just be 41. So extra deck, Artemis, SP, Dark. This is pretty much the same. Since I'm no longer on horses in the main deck, I'm only playing Dingirso as my only rank 8. I am playing Typhon. Typhon is very good. Now for the other synchros that I'm playing, Draco Berserker, Chaos, Second Chaos, Supreme Sword Soul, Dispater, Baron, Crimson, Calamity, Double Legatia. So in the future, I think everything in my extra deck worked just fine. I guess I should talk about these synchros right here. I'll talk about these four, and I'll talk about the Berserker. So when playing around with the Vision Resonator package, I essentially wanted like a synchro monster that was very strong, that was level 8. And we had a couple of options. Option number 1 was Red Dragon Archfiend, unironically, because Red Dragon Archfiend actually works with Crimson Gaia. For those who don't know, Crimson Gaia has has a bunch of effects. I guess I should talk about what Crimson Gaia does for those who don't know what this card does. This card can add you from graveyard or deck card that mentions Red Dragon Archfiend or Red Dragon Archfiend. So this grabs you the Vision Resonator. And the Vision Resonator, when it falls to the graveyard, it grabs the Crimson Gaia from deck. So that's how the engine works. However, this card has 2 more effects that are really, really strong. The other effect is that if you have Red Dragon Archfiend and you enter a battle phase, you can Book of Eclipse all your opponent's monsters, which is really strong against a lot of decks. like for example, Voiceless Voice kind of struggle against this card because this card can actually wipe out their entire board even under the protection of barrier of the Voiceless Voice. The last thing this card does is that if a card on your board gets destroyed, you can reborn Red Dragon Archfiend, which is also strong because if you end up reborning it, it is a level 8 monster, so you can essentially end up like summoning Primera or having Primera on board with this reborning. And if you have stand up Centur-ION, then you can just synchro summon on your opponent's turn. Or with a Toot of the Branded, you can also reborn. You can also synchro summon your opponent's turn because Red Dragon Archfiend is a dragon monster. So that was one option. Uh, Another option was Scarlet Red Dragon Archfiend. Another option was Cypher Lord Omega. But I ultimately opted for Draco Berserker because Draco Berserker is also really strong if you make it with your Centurion cards. And Draco Berserker is also really good as an interruption in part of your end board. If you end up like if you end on this scenario where if you end up on a scenario where you just cannot make Legatia as an interruption or you cannot Calamity lock your opponent, which is very, very strong. So I don't regret this choice. I think this card is staying in my extra deck. Also going second as a board breaking card, this card is also very strong, which is one of the reasons the Zelantis board that I mentioned earlier could have been contested. Because with Chaos Archfiend and Draco Berserker, you essentially have two monsters that function as very strong board breakers when you're going second. And having Draco Berserker plus Ghost Ogre just gets rid of the Zelantis board that I mentioned earlier. But again, I only have 40 seconds, so I couldn't win that game. And they also have Promethean Princess and Linkuriboh. So before playing Vision Resonator, I was not a fan of Dissipator. I think Bestial Dissipator was not that good, at least in testing. With Vision Resonator, this card is actually amazing. And post Legacy of Destruction, this card becomes even more insane. Because essentially what this means is that if you open a Bestial plus Vision Resonator, you can start your Centurion plays without needing any Centurion cards in your hand. Essentially, the way that'll work is you have your Vision Resonator and you have, like, for example, Lebellion. And obviously, you need a lighter dark in graveyard for this, but essentially, what you do is you pitch Lebellion, you add your other Bestial. You banish something that's not Lebellion, your Bestial gets summoned. Since you control a dark monster, level 5 or higher, you Special Vision Resonator. You tribute for Lebellion. Lebellion activates. You can use Lebellion effect. In this case, you grab Branded Regained because it comes up a lot more. You synchro these two into Dissipator. And if you have Vision Resonator banished as part of your line, you can use Dissipator effect, bring back the Vision Resonator, and 10 plus 2 equals 12. So this summons Legatia. And not only do you have Legatia, but you have like the end phase of Magnamut's effect, and you have Branded Regained, so you can reborn the Dissipator back. So that's the synergy that we have in this deck now, which is essentially one of the reasons the Resonator package is just very strong. But yeah, with a lot of ways your opponent is banishing from the graveyard, this card is also very strong. Like, one of my Fire King opponents that I won against, I won that game because he had the wanted Seeker of the Sinful Spoils. They had the wanted spell banished, and that essentially became a monster negate for Dispatcher's effect. I was trying to fight through his board. He had Nibiru, and I just used Dispatcher, just putting back their wanted spell to negate Nibiru, and that pretty much just won me the game. Um, but yeah, Sword Soul is another level 10. You can make it with Vision and like either your Centurions or Lobelion. And this card is a win condition against Floowandereeze. It's also a win condition against like Branded and against Runics. Like if you face like any of those decks that revolve around banishing cards, this card is really, really strong. It's just a really strong out card for them to out. Like like it's so ridiculously hard for Floowandereeze to get rid of this card. Like I'm not even kidding. Like you should try it. You'll notice. Baron is Baron. That's kind of obvious. Uh, Chaos Angel is pretty much the MVP of my extra deck. Like it works with the Vision Centurion package. It works with Primera plus Abystial. If you do Primera plus Abystial, this card is unaffected by monsters. And the Adventure Synchron player that I faced against, they did Calamity Lock me, but I summoned the Chaos Angel. The way they won that match is because they played the Adventure engine, which means that they had the Draco back to bounce this back to the effect. If they did not have that, they were not winning that game at all because they had no real way to get rid of this card. But yeah, that's pretty much it when it comes to like the aesthetic. Now let's go to a side deck. 3 draw, 3 ash, feather, 3 cosmics, 3 iron thunder, and 2 sullen judgments. For those who don't know and are new to the channel, I already talked about this in the past, but your deck does not need floodgates to win. Like you essentially already have a floodgate with this setup. So the way you should be winning your duels is not by floodgating your opponent, is by like playing cards to solidify your board. Uh, One problem that Centur-ION always has is they pretty much always lose to this card, specifically to Cosmic Cyclone. And you can make the argument to just play Crossout for Cosmic or play stuff like Artifact Lancia. However, these cards are just way more universal because not only does this stop Cosmic Cyclone from resolving, but it really stops a lot of plays. And in a simplified game state, you're going to win the duel if you resolve these cards. Like, that's essentially like the power behind these cards specifically. There's no real reason to play one over the other. However, Iron Thunder can negate monster effects, while Sullen Judgment cannot, which is something that I valued more when it comes to like Iron Thunder. So I want to talk about Ash Blossom because there is something that happened during one of my Snake-Eye Fire King matchups, and it's one of the reasons why this is not in my main deck. So around 5, I think it was around 5. On round 5, I faced my third Snake-Eye Fire King opponent, and they won the die roll. Again, I did not win on single die roll except one. And they went first. They summoned Diabellstar, the Dark Witch, and they activated Lullaby of Obedience, calling Ash Blossom. Shoutouts to Pack because he did talk about that on like his YCS second place deck profile. He talked about if you have that Diabellstar Witch and you call Ash Blossom, it's very, very strong if your opponent has it, because what it could happen, one of two things can happen. Either you give them the Ash Blossom and they have a hand trap for next turn, or you summon the Ash Blossom, and if they run Baron in their extra deck, they can make Baron with the Ash Blossom and the Diabell Star. Since I had since I did not have Ash Blossom in my main deck, that play did not happen. That way, they essentially lost on 2,000 life points. Their Love of Oblivions fizzled. Um, and in the end, what ended up happening was I had Valor and Imperm to just stop the rest of their plays that they were trying to make. So another reason I don't play Ash Blossom in the main deck is because it just becomes a catalyst for Hita, the Fire Charmer, and I do not want to lose to that card. So essentially, this is another card that just falls liability into that. So you don't want to like just lose to that card, like essentially. Um, the last reason for not maining Ash Blossom is because it's not light or dark attribute, meaning that it does not fulfill the purpose of like the tax for the bestial cards, and this card is essentially good against extenders and not starters. If you're using this on a starter card, then that interaction with the starter cards could have been Imperm Valor or Ghost Ogre or like the bestials, depending on the matchup. Um, I do still play Ash Blossom because this card is still very strong against like the more roguish decks. Again, two of my three losses was against rogue decks, so uh, just having Ash Blossom somewhere in your deck should be warranted if you know that you're going to play in an environment where those decks are going to be more popular in the format. Uh, but yeah, that's pretty much has been my deck for the weekend. I don't think I regret any choices besides the Nibiru. Fun fact: I actually did get Nibiru like fourth. Well, my opponent tried to resolve Nibiru like 7 times against me today. And the only time Nibiru resolved, I actually won that game. So if you're playing a Centur-ION player and you are playing Nibiru in your deck, don't Nibiru. Don't play Nibiru. It's really not that good against this deck. Like this does look like a heavy combo deck, but it really is not. Like it's just a very simplified control deck that just has a plethora of extenders, which is something that is needed in this format when you're playing in a super heavy hand trap format. Um, but yeah, that's it from me. I hope you like your liking, understanding, and explanations. Uh, I will make another profile like involving this deck in the EJ Gaming channel, and I will post that in the community post. So stay tuned for that. Shout outs to EJ Gaming. I will post the channel in the description. They're a really good team, and I couldn't be happier to be in like in their roster. One of the players in our team did make top 4 at the double case tourney this weekend. So uh, there might be a profile on their channel later. Yeah, that's it from me. Keep practicing and keep doing it.